Hey guys, it's Grandpa again. We're getting ready to read chapter 4 today. Chapter 4 in our book is found on page 25. And it looks like this. The page before it says 24 at the bottom, so I know that this is page 25. And at the top it says chapter 4, and it's called The Emergency Meeting. In the last chapter, when we left off, she came home and she found that there was a red flag up, which meant she knew it meant that there was a family meeting that she was supposed to go to. So that's where we start today. Poppy ran across the lopsided porch and into the parlor. The whole family had indeed gathered. Poppy's father, with his thimble on his head, was in his accustomed perch atop an old straw hat, already addressing the crowd. The moment Poppy entered the room, he saw her. "Ah, Poppy," he cried. "You're late, but at least you're here." All the mice, a sea of ears, eyes, pink noses, and whiskers, all turned to look at her. "But where's Ragweed?" Lungwort demanded. "Wasn't he with you? Do you think he'll have the common decency, not to mention courtesy, to consider joining us at this moment of crisis? Or is he beyond that?" With so many eyes fixed on her, Poppy could not speak. "Well, Poppy?" Lungwort asked. "Do you know where your friend is?" Poppy stammered. "May I tell you after the meeting?" she said. Lungwort murmured a humph, as well as a "I suppose," and "thoughtless children," concluding with, "Just take your place, please." Poppy slipped forward and crouched down next to Basil, her favorite younger cousin. "Where you guys been?" Basil whispered. "Out," Poppy replied weakly. "Poppy, you don't look so good. What happened to your nose?" "I can't explain right now." "And where is Ragweed?" "I'll tell you later," Poppy insisted. Basil gave his cousin a questioning look but held his tongue. Lungwort, leaning over the crown of the farmer's hat, tapped his thimble cap and held up a paw to command for silence. "For Poppy's sake," he began, "I'll review what I've already said. Our family has grown very large. So large, in fact, that there is not enough food in this neighborhood to feed us all. Indeed, our family is still an expanding one." He nodded to sweet Cicely, who smiled in dutiful recognition of the remark. "For example," Lungwort continued, "my wife and I have had 75 children, who in turn have given us 40 grandchildren, 20 great-grandchildren, and 12 great-great-grandchildren." This remark was greeted by the assembled mice with a generous tapping of their tails on the floor. Lungwort dipped his head in acknowledgement of the tribute, and then he went on. "The truth is, though, by my calculations, at our current rate of population growth, and it's this that I was about to say when Poppy arrived, promises serious food shortages, sickness, and yes, even death, unless we take action within the next few days." There was an immediate buzz and squeak among the family. "Good grief! How awful! What'll we do now? Who would have guessed?" Lungwort raised his voice over all the hubbub. "Living in the open will not do. The dangers of that are obvious. No, we need to establish an extra residence, a home near to abundant food, but still close enough to Grey House, so that the family with its present leadership can be maintained. And of course, the second dwelling must be someplace safe. Happily, I have been informed by an old sparrow acquaintance of mine that a new home has been built within the territory." Again there was chatter. "Where? Have you seen it? What is it like?" "It's on the northern side of Dimwood Forest. New House, it's called. It's a half a day's walk from here. That's so far. Almost in another country. I've never been away from home. I'll bet it's not as good as this place. Lungwort held up a paw. The talking stopped. This new house is reachable by the tar road, across the bridge, and beyond the new field, which I've been informed has abundant food in it. Somebody else can go. Wonder what kind of food there is. I doubt I'll do well there. Well, naturally, I will need to go investigate this new house with care. Would I get a room of my own? Can I keep sharing with Tansy? They'll never get me to go. I won't bunk with Husk. Further, there will be much organizing and packing to be done. Oh, I hate the thought of packing. I don't have too much to move. I just put together a whole new room. Finally, Lungwort went on, we will need a delegation to go through the formality of talking to Mr. Okax for permission to move. This time, Lungwort's words brought silence in the room. Every eye looked down or looked away, except for Poppy's. She could only stare at her father in revulsion. How could he even suggest such a thing? Now, Lungwort said, Mr. Okax has always been most accommodating. Need I remind you that he protects all of us from porcupines? We all know about porcupines, don't we? We do indeed. Have we ever so much as seen one porcupine in these parts for years? Not a one. Proof enough that Mr. Okax is holding up his end of the bargain. As long as I'm the head of this family, I expect us to do our part. Asking his permission to move is an insignificant sacrifice to make for our well-being. All right then, Lungwort concluded, looking around. Any questions? Poppy had no idea what Ragweed would have asked, but she knew it would have been something. Good, Lungwort said. I thank you for your attendance. You may now go about your business. I will keep you informed as always. Poppy, would you be so good as to remain? I'd like to have a private word with you. With much excited chatter, the mice scurried off until it was only Poppy, her parents, and Basil remaining. Now can you tell me what's going on? Basil asked. You look really bad. Poppy, trying to find the words to tell her parents about Ragweed, had closed her eyes. Basil tugged at her. Poppy? Did something happen to Ragweed? She gave a nod. What? Poppy, her father called from across the parlor. I'm waiting. Poppy opened her eyes and turned to Basil. Stay close to me, she said to him. I'm going to need you. Slowly, Poppy crept towards her parents. Basil trailed behind. As his daughter approached, Lungwort drew himself up for a show of dignity. Well, Poppy, he said, I suppose I should be grateful that you managed to find time for a family meeting. Papa, Poppy began. You see, suddenly Sweet Cicely asked, Poppy, what did you do to your nose? It's that... Oh, we can deal with her nose later, Lungwort interrupted. What I wish to say first, Poppy, is this. As I made my announcement about the house, you did hear it, didn't you? Yes. When I mentioned making up a delegation to go to Mr. Okax's, I was saddened that not one of your brothers or sisters would look me in the eye. It was as if they were all fearful. But you, Poppy, you were steady on the mark. Your eye never wavered. Straight and loyal. I admire that in a young mouse. Therefore, I have selected you as a way of a reward, and it is a grand one, isn't it, Mother? Sweet Cicely brushed her ears and smiled thinly. Right. Then, Lungwort continued, Poppy, I have selected you to go with me to go talk to Mr. Okax. You what? Poppy cried. I know it's an unlooked-for honor, Poppy, but you heard me right. You'll be joining me when I go to talk to Mr. Okax. But, Poppy tried to find the words, but she could not. But what, Poppy? But Mr. Okax just ate ragweed, Poppy blurted out. Suddenly, there was stunned silence. He ate ragweed? Sweet Cicely finally gasped, her voice half gargling, half squeaking. Did I hear you say that correctly? Trying to stop her tears, Poppy nodded. When? Lungwort demanded. How? Why didn't you tell me? Well, I barely just got back, Poppy sobbed. And when I walked into the meeting, I couldn't just say. Pawing the tears from her face, she whispered, I just couldn't. But to be eaten by Mr. Okax, Lungwort sputtered, without even informing me. Sweet Cicely suddenly turned on her husband. Oh, stop that, she cried. We need to know what happened. Poppy, go ahead. Poppy, her heart heavy, stammered, that is, Ragweed and I. Last night we went out to Bannock Hill. I mean, we had never been there before. It was such a beautiful summer night, and we thought it would be romantic. It was lovely, and he had just asked me... Poppy paused to look at her parents. Certainly they would not be sympathetic. She decided to skip some parts of her story. Then Ragweed found a hazelnut, she went on. He loved nuts, so he started to eat it. I told him that he should get under cover, but he wouldn't listen. And then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Mr. Okax was upon us. I hadn't heard a thing. He was just suddenly there. He almost got me too, she said, pointing to her nose. But he caught Ragweed, she whispered. It was awful. Sweet Cicely hurried forward, gathered her daughter in a hug and patted her back. A very uncomfortable Lungwort kept clearing his throat and fiddling with his whiskers. And then, Poppy went on once she was sufficiently calmed down, when I started coming back home, Mr. Okax tried to catch me. Again. But again I managed to escape. Lungwort shook his head. Poppy, he said, I'm bound to ask you, did you go through the proper formalities before going up onto that hill? Well, we... Come now, Lungwort shouted, his agitation bursting out his anger. Did you or did you not ask Mr. Okax for permission to go up there? Answer me. No, Poppy admitted. Well then, Lungwort said, if Ragweed's death can be an object lesson to the rest of the family, perhaps what happened will serve a useful purpose. Good out of bad, so to speak. Ragweed wasn't bad, Poppy objected. I never said he was bad, but without doubt, his thinking was bad. He was a rude, thoughtless, headstrong mouse. Not one of ours, may I point out. Indeed, if your friend had followed the rules, if he had accepted things as they are, if he had just listened to me, he would still be here today. Such a short, unhappy life, Sweet Cicely sighed. I warned him, Poppy, Lungwort declared. I did. Let no mouse say otherwise. Though he was no son of mine, I did my duty by him, but he would not listen to me. There should be a lesson learned from this. Poppy tried to protest. But Ragweed and I... But again Lungwort interrupted. Poppy, two things. First, I want you to go among the rest of the family and explain what happened to your unfortunate friend. Be so kind as to point out the cause that you did not ask for permission from Mr. Okax. I desire no such tragedies to befall any one of us. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And second, what I said stands about your coming with me when I request permission from Mr. Okax for us to move. Let's hope that your presence will convince him that 1, you truly are apologetic for what you've done, and 2, in the future you will always ask for his permission before venturing anywhere. So saying, Lungwort, with one paw around sweet Cicely, went off, leaving Poppy and Basil alone. Poppy looked after them for such a long time that Basil reached out and touched her. Poppy? He asked. Are you all right? Oh, Basil, Poppy said with a mix of sadness and anger. Ragweed wasn't unhappy. Or bad. He wasn't. Maybe he was a little cocky at times, but I loved him for that. I did. Once again, tears trickled down her face. Poppy? Basil asked. So, are you really going to go see Mr. Okax? I don't think I have much of a choice, do I? Only I do wonder what's going to happen when he recognizes me. Her cousin's eyes grew wide. Do you think he will recognize you? Poppy pointed to the scratch on her nose. How can he miss me? He's the one who put this here. And that is the end of chapter 4. Next time we're going to start with chapter 5. So Poppy has to go talk to Okax. That doesn't sound like something I would want to do. All right, it's good to see you. Hope you're liking the book so far. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.